All right, so we got another week of the coronavirus, part two, part three, part five, how many times it's been doing whatever it's doing. Again, for those of you who may not know me, I'm Brandon Dell'Orto, Granite Bay High School AP U.S. history teacher, and we are trying to make the best of a very different situation in our lifetime. So we're now moving into our second full week of online, and that is getting us into what is known as the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution is a time in which, in essence, machines will start to replace man, or at least make what man does happen a lot faster, and women, as far as manufacturing things. So we're going to start to use factory manufactured, mass produced industrialization. And it happens in most modern societies over time. So it's going to happen to us in this time period from 1865 to 1898. Now, theoretically, the time period is about machines being used to mass produce things. Then we've been in an industrial revolution for a pretty long time. But historically, they kind of pick it up at the end of Civil War, 1865, and we're going to then push it out to the Spanish-American War, which will then begin a new story called imperialism, which is really kind of an overlapping story, but we'll blend those later on. Right now, it's just about actually an overview of how everything is going to be working in the time periods. So again, it's going to be machines, steam-powered later on, diesel-powered later on, coal-powered later on, electricity powered across the board. But basically, machines are going to start to help us manufacture things a lot faster, doing a lot more work than we've ever done before. The Industrial Revolution is going to follow, obviously, the antebellum era, and it's going to then go into the imperialism era. But really what happens, and the way to kind of think about it is the Civil War gives a jump start to what would have happened in the United States anyways. Most countries are going to go through an industrial revolution following an agricultural revolution, and the United States is going to start the Civil War as an agricultural powerhouse, with cotton being king and being exported along with rice and tobacco and indigo and corn and wheat and all other kind of things that we're making. We're going to come out of the Civil War, a very first industrial war, with mass-produced cannons and rifles, repeater rifles, Gatling guns and things. We're going to come out of the Civil War as a pretty quick-growing industrial powerhouse. The way we did it basically was an infusion of money coming from the federal government for the sake of the war. So the war will become kind of like the catalyst starting point of our incredible rapid growth in this industrial revolution. And it's going to be like, fast forwarding some sort of body development, with something like, I don't know, steroids or something. So we have already gone way across our country. We have natural resources to boot all over the place. As we've already talked about in class, if you were actually born in 1766, as the United States is wrestling in the colonial era with Great Britain over issues like stamp tax, and then stamp tax being taken away, but the Declaratory Act in 1776 happening. What in your lifetime you had seen is this incredible rapid movement across the continent, sea to shining sea. And by the time that you're an 87-year-old man, we will have literally pushed out the edges of our continental United States. We still have Alaska and Hawaii to do, but in your lifetime, you've seen this happen. Well, as we go across this time period, our industrial development is going to take advantage of this natural resources we have. Now, as many of you know, hopefully not firsthand, steroids can help you grow muscle tissue really quickly, but it doesn't help you grow bone. It doesn't help you grow tendons. It doesn't help you grow the other stuff. So you can look like a really strong guy, but not be necessarily ready for all that strength. And that's kind of what's going to happen in the United States. We will become an industrial powerhouse, but we really won't be ready for industrialism. Not yet. Oh, by the way, that picture over there is not anything. Well, that picture over there, it's not anything disrespectful to our current president. It's not even a picture of him, really. It's actually, anyway, so one way or another, in this time period, what we have is the aftermath of the Civil War has left us with an incredible economic boost, but a humongous number of people dead. Anybody that is east of the Mississippi, for the most part, knows somebody or knows a family that's had someone lost in this war. Proportional to the actual population of the United States nowadays, the Civil War population was around 30 million. So if we went through a similar situation with this kind of loss of life in our time period, with the population being basically 325 million or so, we would have roughly 6 million dead. You know what that would do to the country. Just look what the coronavirus is doing to us right now, which is hundreds of dead. So this war, in essence, is going to cause our politics to go into this weird kind of almost, I don't know, netherworld of strangeness when we have the North and the South and the Republicans and the Democrats that we've been talking about kind of fighting over each other with political power. They really aren't focusing too much at the time period on what the everyday people need. What the everyday people need is just to get ahead. In 1862, if you remember, Congress passed something called the Homestead Act, which allowed about a football-sized piece of paper, piece of property, 160 times over, more or less about that, looking down at Granite Bay High School, to be given to each person for free. All you got to do is live on the land for 5 years. Well, that just flooded the country with people coming from outside of our country. Europe is going to pour in immigrants, especially from Ireland. They're also going to come from China and Asia and different places, all looking for their homestead, their little chunk of the American dream. And out in the West, where all the land is open still for the taking, you're going to find people making houses out of sod, and they will just put sod houses. We'll come back to talking about this in a while more specifically. This is just their overview. But as they make these houses, they're in essence getting the American dream, or the modern version of it, land, something that you can actually call your own, that is belonging only to you and your extended family, even if it is made out of little chunks of turf, but are strong enough to have a cow sit on the roof, because that's a pretty strong turf house. That's actually on the hill behind it. But anyways, what we have in this Homestead Act then is a kind of mass exodus, also referred to as exodusters, for a handful of blacks that will leave the South and then migrate to Free Soil, Kansas in this time period. You also have this kind of pushing then, as we do this overview, as the people move west, they are obviously going to push out the people that were there already, the original natives of the land, Native Americans. And so in 1877, at the end of an Indian War, which we'll talk about in more depth later on, Congress will finally say, Indians, you no longer are going to be tribes. They're going to make you basically farmers. And so starting with the story of Indians, with the 5 civilized tribes going all the way across to our story, they will be pushed out as this westward movement fills in the land on these settlers looking for homesteads. That movement will be accelerated when we actually have the Transcontinental Railroad. And the Transcontinental Railroad will be fixed up as part of the 1862 Pacific Railroad Act, constructed mostly by Chinese and Irish immigrants coming into the country at the time period. But they'll be pushed out of the picture so that Leland Stanford can kind of nail his down little golden spike, which he missed twice. But one way or another, this is going to be in a moment for America, a Captain America kind of America, an America that is now going to feel its oats. But remember, those rails, predominantly by Chinese and Irish. And what will happen then in this age of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution that is being released in 1859 and is beginning to have people start to struggle with the idea of what does it mean to be a civilization. At the same time that we are growing and becoming one of the strongest, fittest, most powerful industrial powers in the entire world, we start to see ourselves as kind of the best of the best of the best, which will lead itself all the way around to the issues of immigration coming to the country. And so as we can see in this little political cartoon, we'll look at with much more detail later on, we end up having a flood of immigrants coming into the country in this industrial revolution area, looking for jobs, hoping to get 160 acres of their own land. But that then brings in people who are often not desirable. The most undesirable for the North of the time period, remember, was the NINA, the no Irish need apply when you're looking for work. Now, the South will have their blacks, and in the West, you'll have your Chinese Americans. So nativism is this kind of mindset, this constant mindset that has a little bit of kind of racism molded into it. It's not just the idea that, America should be for Americans only. It's kind of got a racial connotation to it that is this idea that there are better races in the world and lesser races. And so as this political cartoon of the time period is going to show, many people of the era of the 1870s and 80s believed that the problem was the Irish were going to eat up Uncle Sam, or on the West Coast, the Chinese were. Well, to make this thing work, I guess the artist didn't really care about this, but we'll put it in the right context for us. Coming from then the East, this way, are going to be the Irish flooding west in their building of the Union Pacific Railroad. And coming from the West then are going to be the Chinese coming and creating the Central Pacific. Coronavirus. Oh, I really have to stop smoking those 17 cigars in the morning, but they go so well with orange juice. What you have then is this idea that Uncle Sam is going to be swallowed whole by the Irish and by the Chinese, and eventually the problem will be solved. So what we have in this time period is a fear of others. And the first group that are going to be basically kicked out of the country or told you're not allowed are going to be the Chinese in 1882 by the Chinese Exclusion Act. But they are not going to be the only that are going to be kind of the foundation or the focus of hatred, fear, and loathing of those WASPs in America, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, the ideal America, if you ask any WASP at the time period. So what we have then is this kind of movement as we get immigrations to build the wall, but whatever wall that is, out in the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean or someplace. But again, the immigrant labor, as this cartoon is going to show you over here, is that this is our cheap labor at the time. So as we move west, we're going to make the rich incredibly rich. We're going to start by making railroads incredibly rich, giving them all kinds of land, but they will give us 4 central time zones for the United States. We'll get again in all detail about this later on. But as we build this thing and give the land away, the rich are going to get richer, and we have a brand new set of aristocrats in America in the 1870s, 80s, 90s, and they are in essence called the robber barons or the plutocrats. They'll call themselves captains of industry, but they'll basically make and break politicians, like those little group of little presidents right there. Corruption will fall into America during this era. It will be one of the most corrupt time in the United States history, other than the 1920s and to a certain extent our current time. And it will also be referred to as the Gilded Age. And the Gilded Lily is a reference to the idea, it's a biblical reference to how pretty a lily is. You don't necessarily need to slather it with gold, but in this time period, the idea is that if you want something that's pretty, it looks even prettier if you put basically gold all around it. Gold, 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 and lots and lots and lots of gold, at least putting it around there. So America has all kinds of wealth. We have natural resources in an industrialized age, but we're going to do mining over on that side, and actually in the West too, cotton sharecropping, farming there, and mining and fruit over this side. In essence, Henry Clay's American system will now be continental worldwide. But we're going to have our workers in each of the areas that are going to be the people kind of doing the hard work in the bottom part. We're going to have the blacks in the South, Irish and the Italians over in the West, the East, and then in the West, the Chinese, Japanese, and other Asians. And then the everyday homesteaders. So we're going to end up having the rich get richer in this time period. The poor are going to get poorer, and these robber barons are going to be the guys who are going to really push America to a breaking point. We end up having labor unions popping up in resistance, and they will fight for the right of workers to have share in the wealth of the time period. They'll have riots all over the place, and then we'll finally get our AFL, which is our long-standing American labor system. Union out there, including our Screen Actors Guild. And then in the midst of this time period, we'll get money and money and wealth and wealth and wealth. And little by little by little, the workers will get poorer and younger, and the rich will get richer. And after a while, people start to ask the question, where exactly is all of this really supposed to go? So eventually, at the end of this unit this week, we're going to have an America that is incredibly out of balance, very, very wealthy and growing, and a whole lot of people at the bottom that are starving, literally living in garbage dumps sometimes just to make ends meet. And eventually, we're going to ask the question going into next week of, is this the America that we want? Is this how it's supposed to be? So that's our intro. We'll talk to you in a while.